Hey everyone, just wanted to give a quick overview of our group call yesterday for those of you who missed it. We had Shelly and April and Mario calling in, so I just wanted to go over just some of the stuff that we talked about. The call was really just for any questions that they had and to kind of freeform off of whatever they brought up for questions. So I had everybody introduce themselves, where they're coming from, and some of the plants they had seen in the past week. So Shelly was calling in right down the road from here in Ithaca. April was calling in from Washington, D.C., and Mario was calling in from a vineyard in California. Shelly brought up dandelion and haskap berries. So dandelion is a plant that many of us know and are familiar with. It's in the Asteraceae family, or the sunflower family. This is the second largest family in the world in terms of numbers of species. It evolved more recently than other plants, and if you were to hold one little dandelion flower, that one little flower actually has hundreds of flowers in that one flower head. They're called composite flowers, and as these plants evolved, they took all of their individual flowers and put them all at the end of one stalk to make a composite flower. And this is basically makes it a one-stop shop for pollinators, so they really, really enjoy being able to go into so many different little pockets of pollen and nectar and collect everything in one spot. And that evolution strategy worked, and now it's the second most popular family in the world. Dandelion comes from dent de lion, which means tooth of the lion. So if you look at the edge of the leaves of dandelion, they're significantly toothed. If you go on my YouTube page, I have a little minute-and-a-half video kind of riffing on dandelion. A lot of the stuff I'm going to say now is on there. The roots, the whole plant is edible, roots, leaves, and flowers. The roots are edible raw or cooked, and they also are roasted for a nice dark drink. The leaves and flowers are edible, as I said before. The leaf is a potassium-sparing diuretic. So a diuretic is something that you take that causes you to urinate a little bit more. And if people are put on a prescription diuretic, they have to be given potassium as well, because that prescription diuretic just causes them to urinate, and it doesn't replace any of the potassium. But the leaves of dandelion are really high in potassium. So even though they're causing your body to excrete a lot more potassium than it would normally, you're taking in way more potassium than you normally would. So it can actually increase your potassium. Dandelions are from Europe originally, and they're often found in disturbed spaces. They have that really deep taproot. They're breaking up a lot of soil, but also bringing up a lot of nutrition. Haskap berries, I was not very familiar with this plant, but it is in the Caprifoliaceae, or the honeysuckle family. So this is a cultivated plant that Shelly has on her farm. And Caprifoliaceae is one of the few families that have opposite leaves. So when you look at that stalk, the leaves will be coming out opposite instead of alternate. And the berries, honeysuckle is very unique because the berries come out, so you have the stalk here, the berries come out on either side. They're like little twins. Once you start to see it, you can get an eye for it pretty well. Apparently the birds love them. They're really, really high in antioxidants, but a lot of the Caprifoliaceae family is poisonous. There's a lot of introduced bush honeysuckles, and then Japanese honeysuckle is a vine that the berries are poisonous. There are a few natives that are edible, but the identification is very hard, so I haven't gotten into eating any of them yet. Japanese honeysuckle covers thousands, if not millions, of acres in the States. It's introduced. It's a vine, but the flowers are actually very strongly antiviral, so we collect them and put them in some of our antiviral mixes. Mario had seen some grapes. Grapes are in the Vitis family, same as Virginia creeper, although Virginia creeper has unknown edibility, at least to me. Grapes, we got a little bit into invasive species and invasive diseases. So France, in the middle of the 18th century of 1800s, there was an aphid that got brought over from North America and essentially wiped out the wine industry in France. And the solution to this was that somebody down in Texas, a horticulturalist, actually figured out that if you grafted the French grape onto an American grape rootstock, it would be able to withstand the aphids. So now all of the, I hesitate to say all, but most of the grapes grown in France are grown on American rootstock. So it's kind of one of the many downsides, but one of the big downsides of globalization has been invasive species. And one that came up as we were talking was one called spotted lanternfly. This is a recent invasive species. They've just started to see since 2014 or 15 down in Pennsylvania. It lays egg masses on flat surfaces that look like just little brown masses, almost kind of like a gypsy moth egg mass, except a little less fuzzy. And it got brought over on a shipment of bluestone from China. And it is just a matter of time until it gets all over the place. I just was at a presentation for one of the researchers who's looking at this, and he's saying when it hits the Ithaca area, we have a lot of grape series, and there's going to be no more organic wine here because you can't possibly grow organic wine with this spotted lanternfly. And if it hits California, that grape industry is in serious trouble. It's already gotten to South Korea and has really taken a toll on their grapes. But there is one point where this spotted lanternfly during its life cycle only feeds on another invasive species we have called tree of heaven, which is in the Cimarubaceae family. So tree of heaven is actually the tree that was talked about in a tree grows in Brooklyn. And it survives. It's really good in heavily polluted areas, can tolerate salt, drought, very wet. It's a really amazing plant in that way. But it has been here since the 1700s and really grown all over the place. It's allelopathic, so it suppresses the growth of other plants. And there are a lot of uses for it. There is a silkworm that will grow on it. It can be used for firewood. It can be used for carving. It grows incredibly quickly, so it could be good for biomass. But in terms of having this spotted lanternfly, this tree wasn't really that big of a deal. It was all over the place, but it's not marching into the woods. But then when you have spotted lanternfly come, this tree now enables spotted lanternfly to reproduce. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with tree of heaven and spotted lanternfly. Hopefully they don't go for insecticides. There is actually a fungus called Aspergillus, something non-alfalfae. I can't think of it off the top of my head right now. But they're researching it to kill tree of heaven. It's native, and when the spores get into a stand of tree of heaven, it does some serious damage to tree of heaven. So if you have tree of heaven near you, use it for firewood, get it down, because that spotted lanternfly will be coming through to your area. I can post a little presentation I made about that last year. Mario is also seeing roses and pears start to flower, pardon me. Both of those plants are in the Rosaceae or rose family. Rose family have 5 petals and many stamen, but that can be confusing because when you see garden roses, you see lots and lots of petals. And that's because when horticulturalists were breeding these very pretty roses, they actually almost reversed evolution. So they started breeding those pistils, those pollen-producing parts, to turn back into petals. Whereas as flowers evolved, they went from petals to pistils. So that's why you have more petals in the rose. But most rose family plants are 5 petals and many, many stamens. They all tend to be astringent. So if you are talking to herbalists and they're trying to ID a plant, but they know it's a rose, but they can't figure out what it is, they call it an ARFA, another rose family astringent. So astringency is when you have red wine or when you have black tea or coffee, that kind of like drying feeling that you get in your mouth, that's astringent. So in herbalism, these rose family plants are used to dry up and tighten tissue, but each plant has different organ affinities. So rose and hawthorn are for the heart, blackberry root is for the digestive tract, raspberry leaf is for kind of the pelvic area and women's reproductive organs, so it can kind of help to tone any of those different organ systems. April, she posted on the forum Hepatica, and Hepatica, she said, looked like it was a buttercup in the Ranunculaceae family, Ranunculaceae, and she's right. I didn't know that myself, didn't call it off the top of my head, so good job, April, on figuring out that unknown plant, you got it down to the family. She also saw Solomon seal, which is an amazing plant, perennial. It's in the asparagus family, so Asparagaceae, and she was able to watch it as it had 2 small flowers coming out and then eventually open throughout the day and drop from the stalk. And just seeing how even when they were really, really small, they were still fully formed flowers, just had to get mature. Solomon seal itself, the young shoots are edible. In England, they have something called Good King Henry, which they will commonly cultivate and eat. And I use the root for joints, but it's a problem because it's a perennial herb that takes a long time to go from seed to seed. So you can harvest this plant if you dig up the root and then you cut off the old part of the tuber. So say this is the root, it's growing on this end. You can cut off this part of the tuber, harvest this, and then replant that little growing section, and it'll allow that plant to continue to grow. We're going to be coming out with a sports balm package. I use that for my joints. My left knee has taken a beating, but this balm has been really, really helping. And then pulsatilla, I assume she had planted that in her garden because that's a Western plant. Also buttercup family, Ranunculaceae. Beautiful, beautiful flower. And I don't use it much because it's a low dose botanical or a botanical medicine that can actually kill people. But it has historically been used for people who are very quick to tears or very weepy. When we did our low dose botanical week at herb school, we had to try each one of these to see what it feels like and to kind of notice what the effects are when you start to have a little too much. And it was interesting because this plant, it's indicated for people who are quick to tears, but since that is not my indication, it actually ended up having the opposite effect. So I felt very, very depressed the rest of the day after having taken this plant. So it's interesting how all of these plants can affect different people very differently. Yeah, pulsatilla is coming out in Washington, D.C. Around here, we have snowdrops are just going past. Just saw some crocus coming up. Crocus is a small flower. I think it's Liliaceae, or don't quote me on that. I forget which family it's in. But that is the plant responsible for saffron. So saffron, they harvest the little tiny pistils, the pollen-producing parts. And that is why saffron is so expensive, because you have to get all these little tiny bits. So incredible anti-inflammatory, though. But we have crocus coming out. Some of the red maples are flowering. The aspen, big tooth aspen are starting to flower as well. That's another one we talked about. The buds of big tooth aspen are used for achy muscles. We're going to be using that. And yeah, things are slowly starting to green up here. Willows and everything like that. But that's the quick overview for the video that we had. Hopefully you can join us next month, and I will be getting more videos on the content from this week up, and we'll continue to do the rest of the content as well. So hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, post it in the forum and we'll get back on it. Hope you're having a good one.